Hi folks, I wanted to chat today about the art of taking photographs at night. Now, this is not often something that's on everyone's radar. Not a lot of people think about it, but it's become a lot more accessible the more private reserves have opened up to guests and more people are traveling to these places. And what being on a private reserve does and allows is the fact that we are able to go and continue our safari once the sun has gone down. National parks, generally sunrise to sunset, some have a little bit of wiggle room either side, but on a private reserve, a lot of the times in places like Botswana, in South Africa, we're able to traverse these areas after dark and utilizing a spotlight, we're able to find some of the nocturnal creatures. That being said, with the impact that we have, there is also one opportunity. And for the most part, we're only out after dark for 30 to 45 minutes before heading back to the lodge for dinner. So our impact time is very short. The rest of the night is to the animals. Now, when we're photographing these animals, we have to consider that we are now in a pitch black environment. And no matter what setting you want to put your camera on, if it is in any sort of automatic setting, the camera is going to be stupid. It cannot and will not function in an automatic mode at night. Reason being is our camera is trying to get to 19% gray. The very clever individual who programmed that camera in the first time went to try and put everything to that 19% gray, so when it sees the black of night and the small white spot of a spotlight, it has a little freak out and it goes, don't worry about the little white spot, everything is black around me, so I need to try and lift the exposure. And what you'll end up with is this blown out individual that will not, or subject that will not look good in any way. So what we have to do is we need to manually tackle this. And this might scare a few of you, but in the greater scheme of things, shooting manual, especially at night where the light is very much not changing, it's really dark outside and the spotlight's intensity is not changing. The only intensity difference that is happening with the spotlight is how far the object is away from your camera. So we have to balance these two things out. So when we're looking and using our cameras, we stick it into manual mode and we then take control of the three things, the exposure triangle: the shutter speed, the ISO, and the aperture. Now, in the greater sense, the faster the lens or the bigger the aperture can be, the better for night photography. So an f2.8 is going to be better than an f4, which is going to be much better than an f5.6. Because as we move through these stops of light, from 2.8 to f4, the light is halved. From f4 to f5.6, the light is halved. So the more light we have, the faster we can have our shutter speed. Now, my general setup is a 400 2.8 and on one body and a 70 to 200 2.8 on another. And I like fast lenses like that. It's not always a possibility, but you have to work within what you have. And my starting off place would be to set my shutter speed at about 320th of a second at 2.8 and the ISO at 3200. As I lose light, I will bring that down. So for an f4, I'd probably be at about 200th of a second, at f4 at 3200 ISO. And this effectively is going to underexpose the image. And we have to keep checking our images to make sure that we're not overexposing the subject or underexposing it. So the only thing that we will be able to move in this case would be our shutter speed, because for me the ceiling of 3200 ISO, even on this newest equipment, is the best I'm going to get for a print quality thereafter, and have a little bit of dynamic range to move things about in. When it comes to a really special sighting, say an aardvark or a pangolin running across the road, I don't care. I'll go to 12,800 ISO, 16,000 ISO, throw it out there. It is not a problem. Get the image. All you want is the image. That moment may last a fleeting second, but when you have time, pick your images, choose what you're doing, make the image, and think about those settings. So, like I said, 2.8, I'd start at about 320th of a second. F4, I'd start at about 200th of a second. F5.6 at 100th of a second, even slower sometimes. And you've got to balance this feeling out as you're going along. The next thing we have to think about is, I personally love animals in their natural environment. It's pitch black. There ain't no natural environment to be seen. So don't leave too much black. Use your zoom, get close in, get facial shots, try and make images that are going. Not to say that it won't work by opening things up and making a bigger image or more black space or dead space within the image, but for the most part we're looking at trying to tell a story. And that story is this animal at night. That story is the intensity in the eyes. We can also use other vehicles that may be in sightings. In private reserves, we limit it to like 3 vehicles in a sighting. And you can ask your guide and say, listen guy, won't you drop your spotlight and let's use their spotlight. Then you have side light on the animal and it creates a whole different animal, a whole different photo. It's like being in a photo studio. Sometimes when we do these photo trips, we actually lock in with other guides who specifically go out just to spotlight for us, just to create the light that is necessary for us to create unique images. Like I was saying, side light, or we can have them highlight from behind and spotlight from behind, creating silhouettes. And we will then manage the time that the light is on the animal. We may shine at its butt or the rear end, which doesn't have eyes, hopefully, and that will be fine when we're not taking photos. Then we get everyone set up, waiting for the animal to be ready, and then we'll move the spotlight onto the head for a few seconds, bang off some photos, have those shutters rip through, and then move the light off and wait for the next moment. So we're constantly creating images. And then in post-production, we'll have to boost and see how we can work things. We need to make sure, one, that we didn't have too much noise, and if we did, we would take it into a program like Topaz, Topaz noise reduction, or we can use the new Lightroom function, the noise reduction Lightroom function, which both work really well at removing a lot of noise and retaining some of that detail. But when I'm shooting at about 3200 ISO, I don't feel like there's too much noise or too much problem that we have to worry about. We're also looking to accentuate everything and make sure that areas that are falsely lit may be taken out, and we balance it out. It's more of a sense of an artwork than a documentary photograph. So be creative, throw it out there and give it a try. The biggest piece of advice, once you've got the settings, you've got to get your light right. And when you have your light right, take lots of photos. The power of digital photography is the ability to delete the 999 photos you didn't like and keep one. It's for free once you have the camera. So take lots of images, because between one or another image, one may be sharp. I always burst on when I'm shooting at night or in low light conditions. I'll shoot 4 or 5 images in a row, take my finger off, recalibrate, refocus, and shoot again. And the reason being is normally the first one, because of the depression of the shutter, you'll actually move the camera, and the release of the shutter, you will lose the camera. So one of the 3 in the middle or 2 in the middle should be sharp. And I keep playing the numbers game to ensure that I find one that's sharp, that's in. And also at night, the autofocus may struggle a lot. So taking lots of photos, refocusing, giving it a second try will give you more and more options at the end. Once you're done with it and you've selected the ones that are sharp, you delete the rest. Happy shooting at night, and I hope to see you again soon.